All right, ladies and gentlemen, Christopher Greene, major warning. Major warning, get ready for the setup. I just posted a video on Rumble. I actually encourage you to watch. I'll add a link here in a minute where you can look me up on Rumble at AMTV Media, but I am very, very personally concerned. And I just did a huge report, which I'm gonna recap a little bit here on YouTube. I'm gonna put on Twitter and also on Facebook of what I believe is going to happen next in Ukraine, and I do not think it is going to be pretty at all. I personally believe, and I really believe this, that we are on the precipice of complete disaster in Europe. And I've said for some time, keep your eyes on Europe. Putin was set to give a very prolific presidential address and speech tonight, but it suddenly, out of the blue, was delayed. But what was expected was extremely dire. And the warning is Putin is potentially about to mobilize some 2 million plus troops into Ukraine and declare a full military war conflict and mobilization in Ukraine itself. Not just a special operation, as he's dubbed it, quotes, in the past, but a full-scale war. As the mainstream media has been arguing that Putin and his forces have been pushed back, that U.S. funded and supplied with arms into Ukraine has helped push back troops, it appears that Putin may, in fact, exercise drastic measures in the days ahead. So very, very concerning. So let's explain what is about to happen. A referendum is about to take place, much like what we had in Crimea and the Crimean Peninsula in 2014. It's important to backtrack our history a little bit. Remember when Viktor Yanukovych was in power at the time, he was much more friendly to Russia. Many argue, and I have to say this is my opinion, that Western influence helped topple the government of Viktor Yanukovych. He later fled into Russia, and it was replaced by basically the current leadership today. However, Vladimir Putin and Russia successfully, whether you like it or not, annexed Crimea and the Sevastopol area, which is a very key Navy port for the Russian government. Now, there are multiple, I believe up to 3 new referendums that are about to be put to a vote in the coming days here in September. Remember, I said September is going to be a hot month. It is going to be, in my view, an explosive month. I have been looking at various dates, not that I get held up too much on dates, but I reported, of course, on the Pope and October 1st and how we see them moving assets, billions of dollars, into the Vatican, centralizing their wealth before what I can only guess is some kind of major economic financial meltdown. So here's what's happening. At the same time, we allegedly have the Federal Reserve about to raise 75, maybe 100 basis points. We are, in my opinion, about to enter a global conflict of epic proportions. Why is this referendum important, and why does this matter, even if the United States declares it a sham? Like they declare basically the annexation of Crimea. They say that the vote was unfair and Putin had heavy pull in the area, even though there's a lot of ethnic speaking Russians in Crimea. Many actually side with Putin. That is a fact, not everybody. But what happens if Vladimir Putin is able to successfully acquire in a new annexation very key locations that they currently have under their control in Ukraine, even with the troops being pushed back in recent days? Now, keep in mind, the U.S. is helping to fund all this. Joe Biden has spent over $14 billion worth of U.S. taxpayer money, your money, while he doesn't do anything to close our borders. He keeps those wide open, but is funneling $14 billion for the military-industrial complex in Ukraine. Without those monies, and without that support, the Ukrainian military, of course, in my view, would not be as successful as they currently are. So we are already at war. And keep in mind, Biden, as he went on camera on 60 Minutes just a few days ago, said that he would arm Taiwan with American troops, meaning men and women U.S. troops in Taiwan to defend it from an aggressor, China, in the imminent eventuality, I believe, of an invasion, which I think is going to happen very, very soon, because it's important to understand that this is not just a war with Ukraine, in Ukraine and Russia. This is very much a hot war with China. Eric Schmidt said this just a couple months ago. He says we're basically losing the AI, artificial intelligence war to China, which is how World War III, these are my words, is currently being fought. If and when, and I think it's a matter of time, Vladimir Putin is able to successfully pull off this annexation in various areas of Ukraine, those areas and geographical territories will become part of Mother Russia itself. That will mean that any attack on that soil will be considered an attack on Russia and Vladimir Putin's government, of which it is clearly stated as a matter of fact and international law that Vladimir Putin and potentially his allies like China could use the full force of defense that includes nuclear and potentially hypersonic nuclear-tipped weapons in the area. This is not fear-mongering, ladies and gentlemen. I believe, again, and I'm putting out this warning for a reason, in my opinion, that we are at this precipice of another Franz Ferdinand moment, which they always point out these particular incidents that they say gave us the eventual world war, when in reality, these things led up and built up over a long period of time. Just like World War II really started with an economic act of war when the United States government put out an oil embargo and an embargo on a lot of other goods and services, which eventually led to the attack by Japan on that tragic day in Pearl Harbor, which I was just in that area a couple of days ago on business and also visiting some of my family. I believe we are there now. The same sanctions that have been implemented and declared against Vladimir Putin, attempting to make him a pariah on the international stage, is about to backsplash, I believe, into the westernized world and send us down a grave spiral that, in my view and opinion, will ultimately and can only lead to war. These are very, very serious events. I also believe, looking at the media itself and the narrative that they're pushing right now, that these events and the timeline for it, quite frankly, is imminent. There's a number of reasons why, in my view, that the central bank and the Federal Reserve, and more importantly, American politicians that never blame themselves for anything, are going to need a very specific scapegoat for the soon-to-be economic fallout and what I believe is a depression that we're currently in the United States. However, it's not the same type of depression that we had in 1929. This is an inflationary depression where real wage growth collapses, where the buying power of the average American eviscerates, where the middle class arguably no longer exists, which is why U.S. politicians and westernized politicians and even the UN Secretary General today warn of global planetary, arguably, collapse on multiple fronts, whether or not this is Ukraine or impending and current famines occurring, especially in second and third world countries, as a result of the same sanctions that they placed on Vladimir Putin, or it is the natural gas Nord Stream 1 pipeline shutdown, which doesn't appear to be coming on anytime soon, which is set to freeze millions of people potentially in Europe in a very hard and arduous winter that will not just be physically costly, but economically and financially costly as well. So I believe this is actually a huge turning point in worldwide history. I believe that the referendums currently being put to a vote in the coming days in September in 2022 are not only extremely dangerous, but also biblically assured on multiple fronts. We're in a period of time, you go back to my video yesterday, where here I am talking about how futurists and technologists are now openly discussing the implementation of men and women integrating their human cerebral cortexes with machines and replications of AI consciousness, to the economic problems that we're currently facing, to the obvious physical conflicts and geopolitical wars that are currently occurring in the United States today. So I want to read a couple things to you because there were some very important quotes. And again, I did put out a video. It's a very good one, actually. You should watch it on Rumble, that you can find me at AMTV Media to see that broadcast. I wanted to read you a couple critical points, a few that came from the Associated Press and one from Yahoo News. It says, many of Putin's closest allies have nonetheless appeared to view that the latest moves currently occurring in Ukraine as a major turning point in the war. Editor-in-Chief Margarita Simonyan, if I'm saying her name correctly, led the charge on Twitter today, saying this quote, "Judging by what is happening and still about to happen, this week marks either the eve of our imminent victory or the eve of nuclear war." This is a representative of Russia and the Russian media itself. It says we are on the eve of either imminent Russian victory or the eve of nuclear war. Now again, if and when these territories, and it's probably a matter of time, are successfully annexed in a vote, whether or not it's agreed upon by the West or not, that becomes Russian territory. Any movement of Ukrainian troops or allied troops would threaten the Russian government, and based on their own defense policies and international laws that they've constructed with the BRICS nations, they would have a right to use any means necessary and possible to protect their land. This could include nuclear, chemical, biological type events. This could include electromagnetic pulse and on the spectrum, otherwise known as EMPs, and a lot of the work that even former President Donald Trump had worked on, implementing the Space Force in the United States as a new branch of the American military. And I also have a few other quotes. This is from Joe Biden and Yahoo News, because you always have to show your sources here. You guys know what's up, but it's amazing that most of the American population, unless it comes from the idiot box, which makes up their television, they won't believe it. So you have to stay at a source for them to believe it, as if these sources are the only benefactors of truth, and as if Americans can't think intelligently for themselves anymore, which is really, really sad. U.S. President Joe Biden, quote, warned in March that a direct confrontation between the NATO military alliance and Russia would mean World War III. Biden and NATO leaders have been careful to say that they do not want NATO troops in direct conflict with Russian troops. So there you have it. Joe Biden warns of World War III just last March. So here's what I've got my eye on. Why, miraculously, has this planned speech, of which should have been a very big one tonight, in Russia, that Vladimir Putin was going to give an address to the Russian people, who's potentially calling for the movement and deployment of some 2 million plus more troops, and potentially the official declaration of not just a special operation, but a complete all-out war, before referendums that are clearly being reported by every mainstream outlet right now will be taking place in the coming days. Here's the question. What will Putin's, but more importantly, China, who's really in charge of this new system, going to do next? What is their move, ladies and gentlemen? So it is almost farcical, I think that's a word, and hilarious, and also incredibly disturbing that the U.S. Central Bank is literally hiking rates into an economic financial depression into the United States and into a world war. That's literally the timing of the central bank. And so while Europe, the United Kingdom, and England itself has been focused on a heavily taxpayer, I believe, funded, an extremely expensive ceremony for the Queen over the last few days, very few people have been paying attention to the real elephant in the room. And this is what I could only surmise appears to be impending doom in Ukraine. And eventually, which I believe is inevitable, as I've been reporting on for over a decade now, a world war event. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Christopher Greene. Again, I'll add links for the video that I posted on Rumble. I hope you take this warning seriously. I've stated where my opinions lie and what I think is going to happen next. I think you should be vigilant. I think you should be preparing. I mean, this is why I do what I do. It's why I've made content for 15, 16 years warning of these events. It's why I created and built the Island Project as a real alternative for protection and wealth in an environment where we have to create alternatives for your liberty and freedom. You should be learning about that. You should be getting into it. You should be forming a real life community with us now while you still can. I think all probably agree that things aren't going to get better in the future, and that it appears we have a complete breakdown of our society, the modern political system, civilization, and even calls. These are not my words, for civil war in the United States. Biden even said himself with that speech and the red lights behind him that it is the Republicans, basically, and the specific term that I can't say, that is the threat to America. I mean, this is what they're saying. As we live through raids of Mar-a-Lago and former presidents, and I don't even side with either one of them, and more conflict domestically here on the ground, and a clear widening wealth transfer from the haves and the have-nots to alternate realities and diverging economies that I don't think we've seen really since feudal society, or maybe even the Roman Empire. And as we enter a singular narrative of what they're calling is this merger of man and machine with robot-like consciousness, of which Elon Musk is about to reveal his new robot, Optimus, that he says is going to help with the elderly and do dangerous jobs and maybe be your personal assistant. I can't help but honestly be absolutely horrified for future generations and truly where we are headed. I don't believe that most of the American population are prepared for this at all. And we've seen that over the last couple of years, as I would say 90% of Americans looked like deer staring into giant F-250 super truck headlights. And I believe it's going to happen all over again. I believe that global populations have been, to a large extent, conditioned blatantly for what's about to transpire, probably within the next few days. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope this message of truth is taken seriously. I hope that you've taken what I've said and espoused to you truly from my heart over the last 15, 16 years. You haven't taken for granted. I hope that you've made preparations. I hope and pray that you're making real serious inroads with us at the Island Project, that you're visiting the links below, that you're participating, if you're already a member at school, in our private placement at islandproject.com. And that if you can't meet that requirement, you're meeting and registering and pre-ordering big right now to the islandprojectclub.com. That's another fantastic opportunity for those of you that don't have the budget or weren't involved in the private placement to get involved with our roadmap and building everything that we're building in the coming days, weeks, and months. And I can't think of a better time and a better opportunity to do that. In my view, and in my opinion, the traditional systems are breaking down. And I don't believe that that is an accident, ladies and gentlemen. Our infrastructure, our political systems, even arguably the moral psyche of the average citizen, it is at a turning point of what I would argue is maximum anxiety, depression, and internal conflict. And we see it in the faces of our brothers and sisters. We see it in the faces of everyday Americans that still, in my view, look like deer staring into headlights, post everything that just happened over the last couple of years. So anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you this message of truth. Of course, my name is Christopher Greene, and I'm the founder and creator of AMTV and also the Island Project, what I believe to be the first multi-billion-dollar opportunity in fractionalized real estate, building true wealth, building true freedom and liberty, decentralizing it and creating a portability to it around the world that's never existed before. That is in process now of aggressively buying property, not just here in Maui, but also our sister island, Oahu, and expanding readily as fast as we can. And I'll leave you with this. There is not much time left. I've had dozens of phone calls with many of you in the last few days, and I've got one coming up here at 2 o'clock. And I basically have been saying the same thing over and over again. There's not much time left to get ready. There's not much time left to pivot yourself into these opportunities before the inevitable transpires. And the inevitable is an economic financial collapse. What billionaires like Ray Dalio, myself, and others have warned of imminent capital controls here in the United States and the West, potential issues with the many large banks here in the financial system that we saw break down in 2008 and 2009. And now a giant global potential world war, which I believe is already being fought. Now, again, this all unravels, they say, unpredictably, as if no one saw it coming from miles away, when in reality, the war we're already currently in. Just like World War II began when the embargoes were placed on Japan and not the actual physical act of the tragic bombing in the fateful day on Pearl Harbor. The same has occurred now with aggressive sanctions placed on Russia, with Russia and China both working together, strengthening their ties, with the BRICS nations leading, I don't even think it's an argument, with the new world reserve currency. What we see in the Federal Reserve here in the States, which I would argue is completely by design, attempting to literally hike interest rates into the depression, because they have no ammunition left when rates are already essentially at zero. And they've already spent $30 trillion worth of debt. And they already have 4.5% unemployment. And they've already blown the wad of all the aggressive PPP loans and everything else that they've done. What else can the central bank, the Federal Reserve, or US politicians do at this point but accept and embrace collapse in the westernized world? I would argue that's always been the plan of the very specific, articulated, and repeated in the media reset, which is what they said they're going to do, and that I've also been warning about for a very long time. So I'll leave you with that. Please like and share this video. Also, click the links below. Register today. You can auto-register, pre-order, and book your slot for Island Project Club today. It's a $1,500 minimum. There's a gauge there. You can book it for $1 to hold your spot. That's all you have to do. And if you're already a member of the club, if you're already a member of BitcoinRich.com, I urge you to take aggressive action and get in, if you can, to the Island Project itself at islandproject.com. Real, tangible ownership of the best asset class and tokenized community in the world. With myself, of course, my amazing, diligent team, everybody here on the ground helping me build it, and more importantly, you tuning in, our community, who I've been blessed to have and quite honestly owe everything to you. I've been rapidly deploying personal capital into the project over the last few years, making huge inroads to our build out. And I'll be tokenizing the event as soon as possible, and of course, rewarding all of our founders as soon as I can. Very exciting. I'm not a financial advisor. This is not investment advice. Please read my terms and disclaimers on my website, of course. And if you have any questions, the only people to speak with are me specifically, with my voice, or my team, or vice president of the Island Project, my father, John Greene, or by directly visiting our websites, our official websites, islandproject.com islandprojectclub.com, and also bitcoinrich.com. Links below and up here. And I also encourage you to watch the video I just posted on Rumble just a few minutes ago. Please like and share this worldwide, and God be with you.